Thank you. Thank you, Mukul. Welcome everyone to the community workshop for the mixed-use multifamily objective design standards. Thank you for joining this evening. We are joined in this workshop with a few staff members. I would quickly introduce them. Myself, Rucha Dande, I am the project manager for this project, the citywide objective design standards for all residential development types. We also have with us Andrea Mardisic, who is our assistant community development director for the planning community department. We have Megan Riddlesberger, who is our associate planner. She's also our outreach lead for this project. In advisory role, we also have Megan Woolley Ousdal, who is our current planning department head, and our principal planner joining us this evening. From the MIG team to assist with these objective design standards, we are joined with us today is Mukul Malhotra, Rishi Dodi, and CJ Davis, who will be helping us walk through this presentation and also help us incorporate feedback, questions, comments from all the attendees tonight. With that, I would like to pass it on to Rishi for the next part of the project.
Well, thanks, Rucha. I'm going to just briefly talk about the overall agenda, mention and share with you all the project goals as well as the process, and then spend most of the discussion that Rishi is going to present with the emerging objective design standards for mixed use as well as multi-family residential developments. But we do want to spend most of the time having an interactive discussion with the community members and discuss different questions and end with the next steps. We do request, as part of this virtual participation Zoom meeting, we are respectful of one another's opinions. We will definitely try to answer all the questions to the best of our abilities. And if we are unable to do so, we will come back with more detailed responses after the session. Like we have requested, please do add your name and email address in the Zoom. And then during the initial presentation segment of this meeting, please use the Zoom chat feature to type in any questions or comments that you have. We do want to remind again that this is one of many meetings that the city is doing in terms of engaging with the community, and there will be additional opportunities for the community to weigh in at all key milestones of this project. In terms of big picture, stepping back, the project overview consists of the key goals, which is to create and adopt new standards for residential developments in our city. We need to meet the different criteria that is outlined by various state laws that Rishi will briefly mention. We do want to make sure we are listening to and learning from the community members, and then reassessing priorities to ensure we try to get superior multifamily and residential design in the city of San Carlos. Our schedule, very briefly, as some of you may know, we started the process in about a year ago in April 2022. We did a number of stakeholder meetings, as well as checked in and did community meetings with the community at large. And there was also a community survey that was done earlier this year. All of this great feedback, as well as check-ins with the Planning Commission, as well as the RDRC, City Council, as well as other sessions, will inform as we develop and refine the different objective design standards. This particular meeting is focusing on multifamily and mixed use development standards. Concurrently, the city is also developing the single family residential development standards. All of it is going through an engagement process. And at the end of the day, we are hoping that this will get adopted in fall of this year. So maybe this is a great opportunity to get to know the community participants, and whether you're an owner, a renter, an employee, someone who works here, or maybe a property or a business owner or a developer, if I'm going to request Rishi to open the Zoom poll, and it would be great if you can type in your whether if you're an owner or a renter, employee, property owner, business owner, or a developer. We would love to hear that feedback. We have about 3 people, and let's give the and we got the third response too. So we do see we have a couple of residents who are attending this meeting, as well as a developer. So thank you again for joining this meeting. And with that, we let's go to the next section of this brief presentation that is going to talk about objective design standards. Rishi?
Sure. Thanks, Makul. So before we share the standards, we would like to set the framework first, starting with what are objective design standards? These aren't typical zoning standards. It is not setback or step back or building height requirements. We are not here to discuss development standards that the zoning has currently. The city recently did the housing element update where they covered all the development standards. Objective design standards deals with the design aspect of the building, like for example, materials used, relationship with the public realm. Are there balconies? Are there porches? Are there elements that engage with the public realm? And ODS, I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep calling objective design standards as ODS. ODS are more quantifiable and measurable methods. Goal is to create more certainty for the projects, both for neighbors and the developer applicant, and that will help streamline the approval process for all types of residential development. And the key goal over here is to increase more housing production. This example shows subjective standard. It says building design don't need to be overly busy, which is a difficult thing to measure. Whereas objective design standards include measurement. It starts to measure different elements of the building. These are the types of measurements we are looking for. It might be a precise measurement, or it may provide 10 different options to articulate the facade of the building, and may require you to choose only 4 or 5 different options from it. It gives architect or the developer flexibility to choose different design options. So where will these standards apply to? Pretty much anything that has residential land use regulations. So that is why city is preparing ODS for single family, multifamily, and mixed use zones wherever residential is allowed. Tonight, we are focused on where zoning is for multifamily housing, apartments, condominium, townhomes, as well as mixed use, which is a combination of ground floor commercial uses and upper floors with residential uses. This map shows there are areas, some in the hillsides, that are zoned for multifamily housing, and the core of the multifamily and mixed use is in the downtown. There are also some parcels that abut to the single family residential districts. Give a quick summary of the community engagement we have completed so far. We met with the stakeholder group back in October. We also did a community visioning workshop in October. We also did a community survey earlier this year that included questions for all types of residential developments, and more than 420 people took the survey. We are also planning to present the emerging draft standards to the Planning Commission and do a study session with them, which will also be open to public. So there's going to be more opportunities in the future for public to participate. And then I'm going to quickly run through the slides that shows a quick summary of all the engagements that we have done in the past. Starting with the stakeholder meetings, we heard from them about how architecture styles should not be dictated. There should be flexibility, options for the developers to choose from, include more high quality design elements that improve the pedestrian and create more livable experience. From our community workshop back in October, we got some good feedback from the community in terms of how to make the development more engaging with the street, whether it is a multifamily unit or a mixed use unit with ground floor commercial. We heard comments on driveways, pickup, drop off, and so on. We also heard how much landscaping was important to the community: large trees, better landscape in the front yards, On the building design, we heard how balconies were so much important to the community to provide more private open spaces. We also heard the need for common open spaces with more landscaping. We heard options for creating open spaces that are also open to public. The community wants to see more walkable environment around the building. Building should not look massy and bulky, and should use more landscape to mitigate the height transition wherever it is next to a single family district. We heard the use of colors and materials as well. To give a quick summary of the survey we did, the survey was open for about a month. We heard a lot of comments. As I said, more than 420 people took the survey, and interestingly, 13% of those people do live in some kind of a multi-family housing setting. We on the survey summary, we heard on site planning, open spaces, wider sidewalks. On building design, we heard about massing, roof line, materials. On the character of the development, community wants to preserve the character of the neighborhoods, create more landscaping opportunities with more native drought tolerant plants, allow for more mature trees that provide shade and comfort. And even in utilities, we did talk about utilities, how to screen utilities, how to create more storage spaces for bike and micromobility in this age. We've also been receiving continuously comments from the public, which we have been recording, and we are also trying to incorporate them into the ODS. Some of them talk in greater detail about sunlight, how much privacy is important to them. There were comments about the look and feel, the character of the buildings that we want to preserve. Now we will jump into the objective design standards, just to give an overview of what are the emerging standards that we have developed. Standards will address these different topics, and a lot of them take into account what we have been hearing from the community, stakeholders, and the city. It touches on a lot of things. There are development standards. As I said earlier, these standards were updated during the housing element, so which the city did some time ago. We will not be discussing changes to any of those standards. We are going to be focusing more on the new standards that relate to site planning, whether it is the placement of the building, the entry locations, open spaces. It will be relating to building design that will cover massing, articulation, how the ground level interfaces with the public realm. We'll be talking about materials and colors, and we'll also be discussing some other details like landscaping, lighting. But for today's workshop, we'll be focusing on some of the key standards that have often come to the top in our discussion with the community. Mm-hmm. To start with, the development standards that are currently in place, we are proposing standards that can help mitigate the building heights that are next to the single family districts by planting large trees in the setback, requiring the trees to have adequate soil area so they can grow and mature and act as a screen to buffer between the single family district and multifamily units. Here are some examples of the building heights next to a single family district that shows how the buildings are being stepped back. For open spaces, we're not changing any standards that is currently in the code, and we are adding to it in terms of what types of open spaces can be designed within the building as well as around the building that can improve the quality of life. These open spaces can be passive, like open lawns, or they can be active spaces such as fitness areas or community gardens. And here are some examples from other cities that shows how they've incorporated these different types of open spaces. They can be within the building or be open to public. Some of these open spaces also incorporate stormwater improvements that improve the overall water quality. Moving to site planning, we are addressing the placement of the building. We are also trying to orient the building to face more to the street, create direct pedestrian connections with the sidewalks. For common ground floor entrances, we're trying to create them, make them more prominent, as well as allowing for ground floor units to have multiple entries. The overall intent for site planning is to ensure that the building engages more with the street that we have always been hearing in different community forums. And then here are some examples from other cities where there are building entrances that have been designed with trellises as a roof. The building on the right has an artwork in the building entrance, which makes it more inviting. Excuse me. And here are some more examples of how those ground floor connections can happen with the adjacent sidewalks. So there is more life at the street level. For building design, the emerging standards are regulating the building mass. So the building does not look boxy or bulky or heavy. We have been hearing a lot from the community that they want to break down the building mass. So the emerging standards are proposing to have the buildings have one of the following approaches: have a variation in wall plane to help break the overall mass, or use materials and colors to reduce the bulk, or using balconies. And then on top of the massing standards, we are also proposing some articulating standards for placement of windows and doors or overhangs on top of balconies. Together with the massing and articulation standard, it helps break down the building, make it look more appealing when you walk along the building, and it engages more with the street. And then here are some examples of some buildings, comparable buildings, with the change in wall plane happening, with the walls going forward or backward sometimes, with the change in materials, with the creative use of placing the balconies. Then some more examples of articulating methods of placing the windows, placing shutters along the windows, creating more decorative detailing as part of the building that makes it more interesting and appealing when you walk along the street. Another key thing, we looked at how the mixed use building with the ground floor commercial and upper floor residential engages with the street. We heard from the community that they want the building to look more inviting, have a visual appeal to it when you walk along it. And then here are some emerging standards that we have included by regulating the height of the building for the ground floor commercial uses, by requiring awnings or canopies on top of commercial entries, by providing options as well in the front of the building facade to include more elements like horizontal bands that help break the horizontal mass of the building, add details like cornices, or use different materials other than the rest of the building. By providing all these options, the developers has options to choose from when they design these buildings. Excuse me. Here are some examples of mixed-use building that shows how they engage with the street, with the use of different materials, with the articulation, with overhangs. And then the last thing that we will be touching today are on the landscape standards. We heard a lot from the community that landscaping in the setback was very important to them. And especially trees, they would want to see more trees that provide shade and comfort. Excuse me. We have developed standards that allow you to have 50% of the setback open space to use more permeable surfaces and planting to create a more sustainable environment, by requiring street trees in the setbacks, by also integrating green stormwater elements like rainwater barrels or cisterns or bioswales. Excuse me. And then here are some examples from other cities where similar treatments have been done with the use of permeable pavers in the parking, be it in the sidewalk, with the connections happening towards the building, using more landscape with trees in the setback that provide shade and relief, and also at the same time using stormwater planters for collecting and treating the water. Today, we are sharing at least 4 different topics where we have these emerging standards developed, and we would like to get your feedback on these emerging standards. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Mukul to facilitate an interactive discussion.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you for the presentation. Like Rishi said, we have 4 key questions that we would like to talk to you about: massing and articulation, building and site design, mixed use interface, especially on the ground floor, as well as the landscape. So with that, I am going to share my screen and share and begin this discussion that we would like to hear from you all about. First of all, what do you all think about the different emerging standards that we have presented in terms of massing and articulation, the different type of elements, like Rishi said, changing the building wall plane, incorporating elements such as windows, doors, balconies, or as well as different materials and colors. Then we would like to also hear from you overall about the overall site planning and design, be it making sure that the buildings respect the street by fronting onto the street and provide direct pedestrian connections, be it shared or individual connections, and also have different elements. Are we missing any elements? We would like to hear from you if there should be other architectural elements or design features we should keep in mind. And the same goes with the ground floor interface of mixed use buildings, be it their heights, different architectural elements, different type of vertical and horizontal features. And finally, we do want to hear about your thoughts of different landscaping and other materials, be it trees, permeable paving, as well as other things that Rishi talked about. And with that, I would like to open this discussion to the folks. Please feel free to put in your comments in the chat box or raise your hand if you want to share a question or have a comment that you would like to share with the larger community. So please use the chat box or the hand icon if you want to share your thoughts or questions you have for the larger group. I know we have 3 people from the community. I see Ali, David, and Richard. So please feel free to share your thoughts you may have. Some of the ideas you have heard, if they resonated, or if there was things that are missing that you have heard yourself you had, or you have heard your neighbors or other community members discuss. We would like to hear those thoughts too. David, please go ahead. Please share your thought. Yes, please.
Yeah, since there are only 3 of us, all these are fine. The thing that is tricky is this is very, this could be very subjective. And when you show the example of being objective, it was very kind of sterile and blah, showing little balconies and so on. And how the heck do we translate, the varieties we have here into an objective design standards without saying, well, the wall plane has to be 25 feet long or 20% of the wall, and the height has to be 20% of the wall. That's what kind of throws me on these building things. So throwing that out.
Okay. Rishi, do you have a thought to David's comment?
Sure. So I would say that as of now, we have not intentionally kept the dimensions. We wanted to share, the method or the design elements that we are trying to incorporate into the objective design standards. But when later on, we will have those dimensions in place that will exactly tell you how these elements need to be measured. The purpose for this workshop is to make the information that we are sharing is more easy to understand for the community, so we can get the right direction or understand from them what are the right elements that we need to incorporate into the ODS.
As you can see by the graphics, there's been some initial thought given in terms of the dimensions, some wall planes, some ideas as to, what should be the different widths, be it 15 feet or a 25-foot wall plane. What has that looked like in other developments? Ali, you have a thought about and a question: will the standards be the same citywide or will they vary based on location? Did you want to share your thought verbally? with us and maybe introduce yourself and then share your thought or any other question you may have. And I'm going to request then Rishi as well as the consultant team to respond to it.
Sure, yeah. Thanks. Thanks for this. Nice to meet all of you. I'm a homeowner in the community, also an architect, and curious when you guys think about these standards, whether you are thinking about different standards for different different streets. Does Laurel Street and Elm Street look different from the top of Crestview? How do you think about that?
Rishi, you want to respond to that? Are we trying to specify based on certain corridors, certain locations, certain neighborhoods?
No, we are all these standards that we are preparing are going to be applicable to all types of residential developments, even including the mixed use, which may have ground floor as commercial or retail, and then upper stories may have residential. So bottom line is these are going to be applicable to any residential development that happens citywide. There are development standards that talk a little bit more about the different types of development that can happen on specific streets, but these ODS are going to be applicable for all of them.
And clearly these standards are responding to the zoning. So certain streets do allow for only mixed use, which do allow for ground floor, non-residential uses. Therein, they will, like you suggested, Ali, will create a certain character to it. I don't know, Rucha, if you wanted to add to that response.
Yeah, and I also want to clarify that these objective standards, as Rishi mentioned, would be applicable to most of the residential developments. In fact, all with an exception for any residential development in the downtown area, because there is a separate project going on, a separate city effort for the downtown specific plan area. So these standards, there will be specific standards within that specific plan for the downtown area.
Got it. So these standards then are for multifamily residential development and mixed use development outside of the downtown area.
At this point, we are planning to do it for a citywide, and then when those two projects merge, we will know which standards are applicable to the downtown. But yes, in the long run, these will be only applicable to the projects that are outside the downtown area.
Got it. My initial reaction is for that kind of breadth, that this seems like it's moving in a fairly prescriptive direction. I don't know what others think about that.
David, you have your hand raised. Did you want to share your thought?
Well, I think I should explain. I'm also an architect who lives and works in San Carlos.
Okay.
And I do multifamily housing. I'm concerned about it being too prescriptive also. It's kind of you can get so that you just kind of feel like, well, I've only got 2 or 3 choices here. Now I know that you have an option if you can't meet the prescription of the ODS, you have the option to apply to the Planning Commission or the Residential Design Committee to get an exception or a change, and so that's kind of where it comes. But something's very simple. For example, well, the picture you got on there right now, covered porch. That's very simple and easy to understand, but you don't have a whole bunch of dimensions here about, well, this dimension has to be X and Y, and that one has to be this and that. Just the concept is there. There's a space between the sidewalk and the building, and there are steps coming into the buildings. The buildings have front entrances. That's prescriptive. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But getting more than that really starts to bother me as an architect and the creativity and the whole thing. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth on just generically at this point. I'm sure I'll weigh in as more goes since we don't have many participants.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on that point, right? I think we want to, as a community, as a city of good living, we want to be forward thinking in terms of design. And we don't want to kind of produce a cookie cutter community here, and a community that looks like, any other, where whatever the urban planning trend is up and down the peninsula here. So I think there's a question about, like, how does the specific character of San Carlos play into this, and how can we sort of open things, sort of open possibilities for to be forward thinking, as well as what's established practice.
I think so. Those are all great ideas, and since we do have two architects who are also residents, I would actually like to have an open discussion. What do you all think, based on your experience working in the community, but also importantly living in the community? What are the elements that would make it more unique or distinct or celebrate San Carlos? I'm sure you all have thought about it as you have designed different environments. What do you think would make it not cookie cutter, as one of you said, and make and celebrate San Carlos? What makes it distinctive?
Well, let me weigh in. Before that, I want to make a comment.
Okay, please.
I noticed when you recorded what I said, I talked about the front entrances, and you said make the front porches more specific or something. That was not what I said. You're not interpreting what I'm saying here. I'm saying making it less protective in terms of the size of the porch or whatever. Just the concept that there's a porch or there's an entry.
You're saying you like that there's no dimension there.
There's no specific that specific a dimension. Yeah, I mean, I did the residential design one too, and there's all these specifics about the front porch has to be 3 feet minimum wide, and this, that, and the other thing, and it kind of gets extreme. As far as the character of the town, San Carlos, of course, big buildings for San Carlos is something that most the residents don't seem to be too happy about. But we definitely have the necessity of bringing them in. I personally, and that's just my personal preference, I like the more Hispanic, Spanish design, like Wheeler Plaza and the one across from City Hall. But I don't think we should mandate that for the entire community. But I think those buildings, and we're getting more of those in the downtown area, I think they're starting to create a consistency, which is kind of nice. I think the one on oh shoot, what's the cross street? Walnut and Cherry. It's kind of a Hispanic complex there that's quite attractive. And so I think it's more. I think the general public are more kind of included, not included, but more interested in that. Like your main title shows the building across from City Hall. I can always forget who did it, and that's the best example I can think of a good building in the city of San Carlos. When you bring your introductory and you have a picture of the building behind it.
Gotcha.
Not that one.
No, I know you said the
which building I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not only a good building, interesting architecturally, but it has nice common open spaces. It's set back from the street. It has an appealing front courtyard. It has the alley that goes by, or the paseo that goes through to the other side. It has a beautiful courtyard along that paseo. That's what we should be aiming for. I don't know how the heck we make that an objective design standard, but that would be my goal for the future. Now, it doesn't have to be that style. It can be another building, but broken up that way. But the features there, I'm especially like the idea in what the one you've got on the image right now is setting back the residential buildings from the street so you can put landscaping and trees in front of it. I would say a minimum of 15 feet, maybe 20 feet. That I think will soften it a lot. And also on the commercial areas, the mixed use areas, I think it wouldn't be bad to think about having that main first floor on the mixed use areas recessed a little bit more. What comes to mind is Nick the Greek along Laurel Street. has a little front patio in front of it. And I think there are a couple other buildings that have patios like that, so that you're not smack right on the street like that, that you have some space that sets them back and they can put tables out and so on. Because as we develop downtown, we're going to want more outside dining and what have you. And if you have some of those recesses like that, well, you can put the tables within those recesses and not block the sidewalks.
Correct.
The parklets that are out on Laurel Street are very practical, but they're ugly as sin in terms of architectural, features. And so, to make it somehow that we can do the furniture out there in a more attractive way. For example, if you had the street furniture directly in front of the commercial section with very wide awnings,
Yes.
could hang over the sidewalk so that they could share, shelter it in the rain or whatnot. That would not block the sidewalk as much. It would open it up more to the street. You wouldn't have the parklets that were blocking the view from the street to the buildings. But anyway, a few thoughts.
No, those are great thoughts, and I love to hear from also what Richard and Ali are thinking. But I do want to stress one of the key things that you all are, and we have been discussing, is to find the fine balance between not being prescriptive, being flexible, but still encouraging good design elements to be integrated in the buildings. And there's a very fine balancing act where you don't want to be too prescriptive, allow but the great ideas to be designed by the designers and integrated in our built environments too. Ali and Richard, other thoughts or ideas, be it for mixed use buildings or even thinking about the overall planning and site design?
Yeah, in terms of the sort of framework for, how you think about this and kind of, prescriptiveness versus flexibility, that it seems like the real challenge here is defining, what is the very minimum set of standards that we can set that still, ensures or encourages good design. Because, no matter how good the standard, no matter how prescriptive the standards are, a bad designer can always mess it up, right?
Correct.
So that's maybe kind of a question for you guys as you think about, sort of putting in these standards, thinking about sort of being really judicious and intentional about exactly which standards we are choosing, and trying not to be kind of redundant, for example. To kind of pick up on the point that David was making, points that David was making about about the street street scene. I think those are all great points. One thing I would add is, and this is kind of a consequence of the previous earlier thinking about urban planning, is that the sidewalks in San Carlos are pretty narrow.
Yes.
And I have a perspective of having moved here from New York 2 years ago. And so just seeing what it does to have, sidewalks where you can, walk 2 or 3 abreast, and, you can pass somebody with a dog going the other way, and, without feeling like you're tight. I think, there may be some option here to encourage people to widen the sidewalks as they develop.
Okay.
Particularly as we're adding density, right?
So have that generosity of space, it becomes a great public space, especially, if the sidewalks become bigger or wider. I also like David's idea, creating that little bit of a landscape buffer that then provides the privacy to the adjoining use, especially if it's residential, along the sidewalk. But it also softens the overall edge and creates a very nice character or an experience, be it for people living inside or just people using the sidewalk or the streets itself. other thoughts or ideas, and I do want to um, maybe just go back to some of the thoughts or ideas that Rishi presented in his brief presentation about, looking at the building edge condition, not always having it along right at the edge of the right of way, but softening it up, and with some of the photos that you're also seeing on the right. And in some of these ideas, I do want to mention that Rishi said, when we are thinking of emerging ideas, we're not saying do this, this, this. In some cases, it may be, hey, integrate one or more, and then there's a palette of different ideas. So designers or developers are not like forced into just doing that, but it allows them different opportunities to explore depending upon the site or the development itself. Other thoughts or ideas on individual categories or questions, be it for massing and articulation, thoughts or ideas of how do you break that mass and articulation that Rishi talked about, uh, be it with changing the building wall plane, making sure different materials are used as a design tool to break the mass, or adding elements like more doors, windows, balconies. Based on your experience, what do you all think?
Well, I'll chime in, but the third party, if she or he would like to chime in, I'd like to hear from them.
I would say the same. Richard, do you have a thought you would like to share?
No, thank you for including me. No, I'm more here to listen.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you though.
Okay. Yeah, the massing is interesting. Yeah, I don't know if you've looked at what San Mateo is doing or not, but I would strongly suggest you look at their progress on the ODS for multifamily. I feel they're really making good forward progress. And I think there's a lot of good ideas in there that you might want to look at incorporating, again, I don't want to get too specific, but the idea of having which are not actually shown on these illustrations, a base, a center, and a top to a high building. But I don't want to make that prescriptive for every building, but a lot of buildings that makes a lot of sense. And like these illustrations don't actually do that. I like them, they're fine, but in terms of prescriptive stuff. So that's the old, that's the classic, all us architects are trained,
Yes.
a base, of a middle, and a top when you're designing tall buildings. The other issue I have with this is that I like the slides you had with I don't know which one it was, talked about the side setbacks and having some trees in the side setbacks. And I think most people like that idea. What I'm concerned about with these ODS standards is that they appear to me to be almost in direct conflict with the housing element plan, because the housing element plan was reducing a lot of side setbacks in the areas. If you go back and look at it, because in the downtown areas, maybe it's okay, but in other areas of town. So you might want to see kind of what's going on there, because it seemed to me that the housing element was really trying, its main goal was just densify, densify, densify. I didn't hear hardly much of anything about open space. I didn't hear much about shielding the sides. I didn't hear, but I did hear that they were cutting some setbacks, raising heights and whatnot. And so I think you need to really make sure you're in sync with Lisa and
Yes, absolutely.
On that. But this slide I like. That's one of my favorite slides in the whole thing. I don't like the third image down on the right. I don't think that really opens up that much, because those planters are blocks to the building rather than helpful. Wide sidewalks, at least for downtown, Burlingame Avenue is a good example. Mountain View's Castro Street is a great example. You might look to.
That's a classic Main Street, Castro Street. And it has been called one of the 10 best streets, at least one of the best streets, modern streets designed. Those are all great ideas. And just for your information, David, we are actually also working with the city of San Mateo on their design standards, objective design standards. So that is something we are trying to keep in mind, different trends and opportunities that are happening in different jurisdictions. But other thoughts or ideas, again, I do agree, the generosity and the openness that we see. Do keep in mind what you begin to see, especially in this case where CJ is drawing, hey, let's have a wider sidewalk and the buffer that you talked about. Some of these that you see, the raised planter areas, as you know, are fulfilling sometimes the C3 requirements so that the water that's coming down is actually being treated and captured first. And could there be a better way of integrating that? Absolutely. That's something also we would like to hear from you all if you have had any experience based on some of the examples you all are talking about of integrating better landscaping or materiality in the overall development, not just along the sidewalks, but just in the larger development too. Any thoughts or ideas on that with regards to landscape and materials?
Well, along to talk about, as long as we're on this slide,
Yes.
and talking about the pictures on the right, as David did, the top picture on the right is, I think that's a great example of what we should not do.
Okay.
I think it's a community of, walking past closed locked gates. That's not a welcoming community. It's not an inviting community. And even what's behind the gate is the parking lot, right? I think, trying to find a way without sacrificing, necessary security, then, but how do we, how can we make our community feel more inviting, more welcoming, more open to each other?
Those are again very good points, and I'm not sure, but perhaps the intention was more, Rishi, correct me if I'm wrong, was to show what you're talking in terms of pervious surfaces. Is that correct, Rishi?
Yes, that example. Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries.
We like pervious surfaces. That's fine.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
I'm on board. I'm on board with pervious surfaces.
But the point is well taken of ensuring that overall the experience or what the building conveys is it helps contribute to the overall neighborhood quality of being welcoming and inviting. And maybe going on to be it massing or articulation, what do folks think? Something we have not talked a little, and maybe we can talk more about the overall site planning and site design. Any thoughts about that in the orientation or individual connections? And as we think about it, I do want to mention a comment that Lisa has said from the city. Lisa, do you want to just share your thought with the rest of the group? And maybe you're on mute. I'll share what you said. Lisa basically said along ECR buildings will be set back 20 feet as required by the code, and other setbacks are set differently according to code as delineated in the current code. And I do want to stress what we heard earlier today or earlier in this meeting was we are definitely maintaining the development standards that have been approved, be it in the housing elements or other projects. So we do, all the design standards are, objective design standards are building on that. We clearly have heard from the city that that's what we need to do, be it for the side setbacks or any other step back, setbacks, so on and so forth.
What is the thinking behind prominent shared entrance that has a canopy roof, trellis, or other architectural elements, and ground floor units may have individual entrances? Why do we need those?
Rishi, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So the intent over here is to make it very evident, where the main entrance of the building is happening, but also still allow flexibility for the ground floor units to have a better interaction with the street, or allow entrances for them to not only access it through the common entrance, but also have their own entrances. So that way the building starts to engage more with the street and there's more life at the street level.
I guess my question is, what are you trying to prevent? Like what design choice that somebody might make are you trying to prevent with?
Well, I think what you're trying to prevent is the standard underground parking, half above grade, half below grade, with the building sitting on top of it. And so when you go by and you don't see, what you're seeing is half of the parking garage, and then the buildings above that, and then somewhere there's a opening somewhere along the way. I like the idea of the engagement. Now, they can be with stoops, so that they're elevated above the street enough so that they feel like there's privacy. These probably are a little bit too low, but if you had a stoop that was up like 4 feet or so, so you could be out on that patio, but not feel like you're everyone's staring at you as they go by or what have you. But I like the idea of engaging the street if we can. But some buildings don't, and including the building that I said was a good example, the one across from City Hall, does not have them facing the street. They have the central courtyard, and then the buildings have courtyards themselves. So it's not, maybe not a necessity, actually.
That is correct. That is correct. And the opportunity of allowing the individual entrances into the individual units fronting on the ground floor allows for, again, that customization of the open space on the ground floor, so that it begins to in some ways reflect, or in some ways respond to the more fine-grained single family developments that may be along end of the block, so and so forth. And that is something beautiful about our streets too, where we have seen and designed it in other parts of the Bay Area. It does allow for that opportunity, that diversity, that customization, and at the same time breaks the overall one building look of the multifamily development and creates a little bit of more diversity and interest as you are walking along the street too.
Yeah. I guess I would just add to that, I love Wheeler Plaza, but Walnut Street, the facade along Walnut Street is terrible for a pedestrian walking past that building. It's just nothing there. It's a big parking garage. And so that's maybe the kind of thing we're trying to ignore. And even on that building, I mean, I know why they did it that way, but I mean, potentially they would have had to lose some parking spaces. They could have put some units down in front and still kind of had the parking behind it. But anyway.
And Lisa also had a question, wondering what the design team's thoughts were on creating curb cuts on the streets for cars, given more pedestrians and people of all ages and abilities will be walking along the streets. So what do we think about that?
Sorry, what was the question again?
The question was, what do we think about creating curb cuts on the streets for cars, given that more pedestrians will be walking along the streets? Will that start to affect our overall walkable environment that we have been talking about, that we like to experience?
The multifamily building like these, we should have just one curb cut or two maximum. Yeah. You don't want to have a whole bunch of curb cuts, and ideally off an alley or something it isn't where people are walking.
Correct.
Ideally it's off the back. In fact, the parking should be behind the building anyway, if it can be, but sometimes we can't do that.
Another perspective on that is, I'm not sure that, particularly if the sidewalk is, fairly wide, I'm not sure if a curb cut that is sort of that's well designed has to impinge on the pedestrian experience. Again, kind of bringing how it feels in New York City. Not that this is New York City, of course, but it's something that the curb cut does do is every curb cut takes away an on-street parking space. And it, and so that obviously is, problematic from a just parking capacity perspective, but it's also problematic because, the parked cars actually create a street wall, or, a wall between the sidewalk and the street that is, that's a more inviting environment. And, when that wall becomes less, sort of more porous, it becomes, less warm, I think, and more disconcerting as you're walking down the street.
Okay.
So
Also,
I guess I'm backing into agreeing with David.
Also, the having garages, facing the main street is, the garages are kind of dull and boring. You don't really want them anyway. If you can avoid them as much as you can.
Yeah.
You want to have, people. You don't want to feature cars. So stuck at one end of the building or around behind the building or something, the access is much preferable, but sometimes you don't have a choice.
Correct, because it may be in the middle of the block, it may not be a corner development or wide enough. Yeah, I guess in this case where the parcel is much narrower and it's more in the middle of the block that we don't have the opportunity. But it's a point very well taken that wherever possible, the opportunity should be, or the building should be designed for the, the automobile parking to be at the back or on the side of the parcel.
Well, even my favorite building, again, the one across from City Hall, it has the parking garage off the street, but it's at the very far right end of the building. It's kind of, it's away from the main entrance and so on. So it isn't quite as obvious.
Other thoughts on ideas, either for the ground floor, mixed use building interface? There were some ideas about creating wider sidewalks for sure, more generous awnings, to allow for the outdoor dining or other kind of outdoor activation that in turn would make the street life more inviting and welcoming. Any thoughts on that? Or I may also then go back to what were some of the ideas we began to explore. Clearly, we heard looking at the classical model of, that's been ingrained in the very first year of architecture school, first semester of architecture school. All buildings have a base, middle, and top. I think the Greeks told us, and then every subsequent architectural style, except the modern style, tried to move with that. But any thoughts on the building massing and articulation, changing the building wall planes, looking at the materiality, breaking it, based on your experience, what you have seen in your community, how it has worked or it not worked, and we should take into account as we develop the design standards?
Well, I guess my only comment would be to not go overboard. If you're going to have changes of material, limit them to 1, 2, maybe maximum 3 different materials. Same with colors. Some of these get pretty busy, and you kind of, it's kind of, I don't know what the best expression is, but anyway, it's better. Simpler is better, I think. And surprisingly, sometimes a monochrome large building comes off pretty well. With a few changes along the way. Another good example we have in San Carlos is what we used to call the Transit Village. I can't remember what it's called now that it's official, along the train tracks. There's a lot of there's building material changes there, but they don't go overboard on the whole thing.
And they also use, you can use less is more. I'm clearly hearing you say that, David. But what we often forget, which we begin to see in some of these photos, is shadow. by recessing elements, you do add that additional materiality and color, which is nature's way of us using the sun and the shadow to create different facades during different times of the day, which gives it a very special character to to the building.
I wasn't criticizing that, the in and out. I was
No,
criticizing
I thought it was a good
materiality
idea.
was what I was criticizing, was too many materials.
No, I agree.
Changing the wall plane is fine. Yeah,
Okay.
I like shadows too. I love trellises. I love, in fact, I always put trellises on my buildings as sunshades over the windows where I can, if it's on a south or a west facing facade.
Well, that was Frank Lloyd Wright's advice, right? Put a pergola if you don't know what the solution is to hide a multitude of sins.
So Frank Lloyd Wright says, if you don't like the building, plant vines. So that's another
Yes.
story.
Well, he also taught us how to use the pergolas very well, and the trellises. Other thoughts or ideas? I know, any questions or other ideas we really want to build? I know we have an intimate crowd out here, but we do want to build on your expertise and experience.
I just one more thought, which is, while broadly agreeing that, good design is usually does not have too many materials or too many colors. I would say, despite that, I'm not sure we would want as a community to be rejecting buildings or disapproving buildings because they have too many of those things. I think,
right.
There's all, I mean, particularly on the color side, I think there's a lot of interesting, vibrant things that happen when people are empowered to make, to really use color. And architects typically hate color. We all like white everything. But no, that's a thought. I do apologize. I actually have to run here. I know we're a little over time, but thank you so much, Mokul and Rishi and David, for the great discussion. Really appreciate the opportunity to contribute.
Thank you, Ali. We appreciate your feedback. And I know this may be a cue, but I do want to give you another opportunity, Richard. If you have any thoughts or you heard something that resonated with you, please do share.
No, I thank you for including me, but yeah, I'm just absorbing and learning more about what the community is looking for.
Awesome. Final thoughts or any other thoughts, David? I know we want to respect everybody's time, and we do have a brief next steps that we do want to discuss, but we love your ideas. So other thoughts or ideas that we haven't heard or discussed, be it in massing and articulation, planning and site design, mixed use buildings, especially the ground floor interface of mixed use buildings, and then of course the landscape and integrating other materials to create not just beautiful buildings and developments, but also a more lively sidewalk and street life.
Okay, well, one thing I will do, I will remind you of all the documents you've probably gotten on this thing from the public. There was one that was sent out by the Sierra Club.
Okay.
About creating open space in these things, and we designed it to be fairly prescriptive. Certain lengths of buildings, certain lengths of blocks, and so on. You might want to dig that all of your archives and see, what's in there. That we were trying to see how we could encourage more open space, more public open space, more private open space. We had it set at like a certain percentage of the site had to be open space, blah, blah, blah. We maybe got too strict because, again, it's hard to get that quantified. But I represent the Sustainable Land Use Committee of the Sierra Club, and so we did that, and we sent it in at least a month ago, maybe longer, about the multifamily. The other thing comment on is I don't know why we're short on people tonight, but as I put in the chat, no one sent a direct link to me on this thing, even though I was signed up. I got a message and I looked at it and it was, I couldn't quite figure it out. And it says, well, go to the website. And I went to the website, and then buried in the website was the link to this thing.
Mhm.
And so that may be one of the reasons people aren't participating also, but somehow or other, just having 3 people from the public on a workshop like this is very discouraging. And I don't know how we can fix that. Previous workshops have had more participation, and I don't know what happened to this one. It makes me happy. I had more I could chat more, but you know, I'd still rather have more people. So that was, you know, I don't know if Lisa's listening in or not, but that could be something to track down on this.
Yeah, David, I can, you know, speak to that. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. We are going to reassess that. I do agree it is a little discouraging because we were so prepared to share all our, you know, progress for this project. But yes, we will reassess and correct what might have gone wrong. But as of now, we really don't know because everything seemed okay on our end. So we are going to reassess it and then hopefully try to get a better, you know, participation next time.
Yeah, I don't know what went wrong in this one because all the previous workshops have been fine. I've been able to just, you know, sign in, bing, bang, boom. So, you know, this was kind of an oddball. But anyway, well, again, thank you guys for working on this. And like I say, find those good examples out there, you know, Castro Street, things like
Yes.
that. Good apartment building or unit buildings. You've got some good, really good ones in San Carlos. Use them, you know, as
Yes.
I say, you know,
Yes.
I've mentioned 2 or 3 tonight. You know, and I'm trying to think of a one that's not the Hispanic style that I recommend. And I haven't found one yet because we don't really have any good kind of standard modern architecture in San Carlos right now. We've got a design for the building across Walnut Street from the Wheeler Plaza, but it's not together yet. I mean, I can't remember exactly how it looks, but it's breaking the mold a little bit. And so that might be one to look at too, to see how that kind of fits in with what's going on here. You know, but you know, try to think of what other buildings we have in town that you know, that are different styles that would fit the ODS.
We like we said at the beginning of the at the presentation, and Rucha maybe and Rishi, this is a good segue into the next steps. This is not the only opportunity for the community to weigh in. There are going to be other opportunities too. So Rucha, do you want to walk us through the next steps before we close the meeting?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mukul. So, David and Richard, since you're here, I would like to take this opportunity to, you know, let you know about the next step. So we do have a study session with our planning commission planned for the May 24th. That is a Wednesday again. And the study session would start at 7 that day, and that will be an in-person meeting at the City Hall. So I encourage you to please come attend that meeting and provide your valuable feedback. That will be that study session will be focused on, again, the mixed use multifamily development types, objective design standards. So again, that will be an extended opportunity for community feedback on mixed use and multifamily standards. And then following that, we will have a lot of other meetings in with the city council and maybe another workshop. So we will still have opportunities for feedback, but the one that is currently planned is for the May 24th Planning Commission study session, particularly focused on the mixed use and multifamily.
Great. And do you want to just reiterate the website and how people can ask questions and comments?
Yeah, sure. So the project website is here. We make an effort to update the project website very regularly. So any information that you might need, the presentation from today and the recording will be updated on this project website. So please, I encourage you to visit this often for the latest updates. And then if you have any questions or comments, I know, David, you have been sending your comments. We did receive it. So please continue to, provide your valuable feedback at planning@cityofsancarlos.org. With that, I would like to thank you so much for your active participation today. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of the evening. Bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Thank you.